All right. Well, I have about 1 minute after the hour. It sounds like a few folks are still joining us, but I think that we'll go ahead and get started because we have a packed agenda today, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to get through all of the information that we're excited to share with everybody who's on the webinar today. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to NCEO's second webinar in our series focused on using local assessment data to measure progress toward the state-identified measurable results, or your SIMR. My name is Maureen Haas, and I'm the SFPA coordinator for NCEO. We're pleased today to provide a panel presentation that includes staff from Louisiana, Guam, and Kansas. So welcome to our panelists today. We're happy to have you here and appreciate you taking the opportunity to and some time out of your day to share your story about what's happening in each of your states. During today's panel presentation, we'll hear from our states regarding their experiences with using data practices at the state, district, and local level, their stakeholder involvement in their SIMR and the selection of the specific local assessments that they're using, and also about advice that they have to offer other states based on their experiences with using local assessments as part of their SIMR. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over sort of a couple of technical features of using ReadyTalk and some other highlights just to manage our conversation today. So I'd ask that everybody please have your phones on mute during the state presentation. We'll have opportunity at the end for questions and discussion, and we'll ask at that point in time that if you'd like to speak or share something that you take yourself off of mute in order to do so. You'll note that we have a chat box located on your screen. Please feel free during any time in the webinar to provide any questions or make any comments that you might have. We have one of our colleagues managing that, so we'll be able to track any information or questions that you want to share there, and we'll make sure that we come back around to address those. As a note, we'll be recording our webinar today, and that will be available in the next few days on NCEO's webpage. You have other staff in your office who aren't able to participate. So that'll be available to you. Just as a reminder, we have lots of information to cover today, so you might hear me as the facilitator jump in to give a cue to our presenters about how much time they have left in their presentations. So I apologize ahead of time if I have to do that, but you might hear that piece from me as well. So I think with that note, we're probably ready to jump in. So I'd like to first of all take a few minutes to introduce our panelists today. As I mentioned, we have the state of Louisiana presenting Christy Jo Preston, who's the manager of Special Education Strategic Initiative, will be sharing information on behalf of Louisiana. From Guam, and thank you very much to our team in Guam because it's 6 a.m., I believe, in Guam on Wednesday morning. So thank you so much for joining us. We have Melissa Limo and Natasha Dela Cruz, who are two principals at pilot schools in Guam, and they'll be sharing the local perspective of what's happening around the SIMR and the use of local assessment data from the school building level. And then we have Carrie Haig from Kansas, who's the Assistant Director of Early Childhood Special Education and Title Services. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we really appreciate you sharing information about what's happening in each of your states. So we thought that we would start off today. Well, let me back up and just highlight again one more time what we'll be touching on today. So we're going to be talking about how these states are collaborating with local sites on assessments and data use. They'll be sharing some information about the data collection and analysis strategies that they're using both at the state level and then local. And then we'll be talking about strategies to actively engage your stakeholders in your SIMR activities and learning from each of these states about how they're doing that. Our outcomes for today are providing an opportunity for you on the phone and the webinar to hear about how three other states are experiencing and utilizing local assessments to address their SIMR. And then also at the end, we'll be talking about TA opportunities with NCEO if you are interested in any support around your SIMR as it addresses assessment issues and things that we might be able to offer to you. So we'll get started with just setting the context today. We will first hear from each state with regards to providing some context about their state use of local assessment data to measure their SIMR progress and any information that they'd like to share about any processes or activities that they have going on relative to the use of local assessment. So I think we'll go ahead and we're going to ask Louisiana to get us started with setting some context about what's currently occurring in Louisiana. So I'm going to pass it over to Christy Jo, please.
Great, thank you so much. Louisiana's SSIP is focused on improving literacy results for students with disabilities in grades 3 through 5. Our SIMR reports progress on the statewide assessment, but that's only administered once a year, and we do not mandate a specific literacy screening or progress monitoring tool in our state. We realized that if we were going to understand what was working with our SSIP, we needed to gather data more frequently and use the results to make adjustments from the teacher instructional level all the way to the state infrastructure level. We sought a measurement approach that would result in accurate and reliable information on student progress and outcomes, yet respected local control. So in Louisiana, we ended up with a two-pronged solution. A short-term solution is a categorical analysis approach, and a long-term solution, which is launching a unified screening and benchmark assessment system across the state. When I talk to you guys more through these questions today, I'm going to be focusing on our short-term solution, the categorical analysis approach, which I think will be useful for other states that are working in a local control environment.
All right, thank you, Louisiana. Next, we'll hear from Guam about their context relative to their SIMR and using local assessments.
Good morning. So
Good morning.
Guam uses AIMSweb, and AIMSweb is an assessment and data management and reporting system that provides national and local performance and growth norms for screening and progress monitoring on math and reading skills for all students in kindergarten through 8th grade. And just like Louisiana, we had also determined as a district that we needed to have assessments that we could take a look at more frequently. And because we could not wait for district-wide assessments to come at the end of the year, we decided to take a look at AIMSweb. And so we do that screening 3 times a year. And then AIMSweb data, after each screening, we use that to determine if there's a need for supplemental intervention. And then we also, and then we also developed a draft guidelines as we took a look at what the AIMSweb data showed, and then we developed and reviewed stakeholders' input on August 2017 to come up with a draft for guidelines. We will be updating and switching to AIMSweb Plus, and then I think this coming August. And then for school personnel, we continue to provide ongoing professional development. We've also had professional development with Menominee Falls, so we partnered up with them and using AIMSweb data to drive our decision making and determine grade level, whether it's grade level, class, or individual student issues. We also took a look at miscue analysis for determining interventions. And then we also are graphing and charting Ames-Web screening data. And so that's what we are looking at in terms of using Ames-Web to help us determine what our next interventions are to focus on reading.
All right. Thank you, Guam. Appreciate that. Again, as a reminder to everybody who's listening in, if you have questions or comments as we go through this, please submit them in the chat box. So let's move on to Kansas.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So in Kansas, our state systemic improvement plan has 3 overall improvement strategies, and the second improvement strategy is the one that provides the context for us around the SIMR. So this strategy focuses on us designing, implementing, and evaluating an integrated school improvement planning framework that is built upon an existing system that we've had in place for a number of years called the Kansas Multi-Tiered System of Supports. And this is all for the purpose of increasing district capacity to provide effective reading instruction for students with disabilities, and specifically around for the SSIP. So the next slide, we utilize our Kansas framework to build a system that addresses not only the reading and math, what we had before, but for our improvement planning, focusing on including reading, mathematics, behavior, and social emotional learning simultaneously. Now, for the purpose of the SIMR, we only look at reading data in the early elementary levels, kindergarten through 5th grade, as the SIMR, and we utilize the curriculum-based measure, the general outcome measures, and use that for instructional decision making within districts. Also, as the next slide has a list of the different types of data points we use across our improvement planning, but the bottom one is the one that we only report on this one as far as the SIMR with the arrows. So that demonstrates our progress, and again, the CBM, GOM measures, the universal screening assessment, and it's administered and utilized throughout the instructional year by the schools, and we do it 3 times a year.
All right, great. Thanks, Kansas, and thanks to Louisiana and Guam for providing a real quick overview about your SSIP and your SIMR in particular. So let's take some time and move into our first question. And our first question for our panelists asks, why did you select the local assessments that you did? Why don't we go ahead and get started with you, Louisiana, in response to that question.
Great, thanks. In Louisiana, we understood that we had to do something to gauge whether or not we were on the right path. We also understood that doing this well would be critical to the buy-in and commitment of participating school systems. However, we're a local control state, and LEAs were using different data systems and data types to screen and monitor students. This created challenges in supporting LEAs to improve instructional decision-making and efficiently tailor professional development to meet their needs. While we knew we couldn't mandate a specific assessment, we could craft an approach to analysis that could be used consistently across various types of LEA data. So in Louisiana, we worked closely with one of the TA centers and with our stakeholder engagement group to understand what was possible, feasible, and practical in our landscape. We decided to pilot something called a categorical analysis approach. To pilot the categorical analysis approach with the 9 participating LEAs in our state, we basically calculated the number of students who moved from one proficiency category to another proficiency category, for example, below basic to basic, for each of the types of assessments that the LEA was administering across the school year. The approach is similar to how students are grouped on statewide assessments in our state. There were a number of benefits to this, maintaining school system autonomy, limiting additional data collection burdens on LEAs, allowing for comparability, and maximizing relevance to decision makers and educators, which made this the right decision for our state. So we basically end up in a place where we made a trade-off, where we said we can't mandate an assessment, so we're not going to be able to, at the cohort level, get a true level of apples-to-apples comparison. So we did a bit of a trade-off where we lost some of the sensitivity and nuance and growth in order to get a general sense of whether or not students were growing from category to category.
Great, thanks so much, Christy Jo, for providing some information from Louisiana. So let's move on to Guam now about why you selected the local assessments that you did.
Good morning. So after a lot of deep collaboration and discussion amongst our SSIP core planning team, we came to the realization, of course, that there was a need to identify an assessment in which we would be able to take a look at results more immediately. The only tool that we had across the district that was common were our district-wide assessment, our ACT Aspire, and prior to that was our SAT-10. So with that in mind, we kind of collaborated a little bit more with other administrators across the district, and from there, we basically, what was going on was there was a group of schools that were using an interim assessment, which in this case was AIMSweb, and so they had implemented the use of that assessment on a smaller scale, starting of course with math, and they had expanded further to reading and writing, and had a lot of good input to share with the team on using it, on monitoring student progress, and on decision making as to the different types of interventions. Because that was working for that smaller group or for that group of schools, that was a direction that the SSIP schools decided to take up. And with that, of course, the growing interest across the district, which was initiated with that small group of principals, expanded further on. So AIMSweb ended up being the interim assessment that the Department of Education in Guam had mandated. Now, we came across some bumps, of course, along the way with the level of implementation from school to school. And I know in a little bit we will be talking about the level of implementation and how and I know Melissa mentioned earlier how we've developed guidelines to standardize how we're implementing, because we felt strongly that in order for us to compare our data from school to school, we need to ensure that how we're implementing is with fidelity across the 4 schools, and then of course later on across the district.
Great, thank you, Natasha. Appreciate that information on what's happening in Guam. So let's move to Carrie and hear about Kansas and why Kansas selected the local assessments that you did. Carrie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, the mute button
That's
there.
okay.
So we wanted a data source that was meaningful and relevant for sustainability. And so this is a CBM test focused on general outcome measures and can be used to predict performance on the state assessment. We did not select our state test because it's given only once a year and it's not enough information to measure interim progress. Also, the state test is not given until 3rd grade, and our targeted population is on the kindergarten through 5th grade. We also think that this assessment is a more usable assessment that can be used to design instruction and interventions for students with disabilities. It measures at the level that's needed to inform instruction. It was also already being used within many of the buildings and districts and by our state multi-tiered system of supports training system and as part of the curriculum and that initiative. It's universal screening data, and then we can also use it to measure progress towards our SIMR. I think the other piece that we have done is that we've really tried to listen to not only our state implementation guides in terms of our state trainers, but also they bring the feedback from the building teams and the district teams about what's useful for them. So we've held that to our heart since the beginning of since we began the work around our state systemic improvement plan, and we figured out a way to be able to have something that met both purposes, because all the assessments are all chosen locally, as it sounds like Louisiana does as well. So we we take their input and feedback seriously and try to adapt our system to meet their needs while still maintaining the requirements that we have from OSEP.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Appreciate that. So we've heard a little bit, some similarities and some differences, right, across our three panelists. Just a reminder again, if you have questions or thoughts as we go through this, just drop those in the chat box, and we'll be sure to monitor those. But we'll move on to our second question for our panelists, where we want to hear a little bit more about how they're using their local data relative to access to the data analysis procedures, maybe collaboration and feedback loops. So let's go back around again and start with Louisiana on this one.
Great, thanks again. So when it comes to interim or benchmark assessments, in Louisiana, school systems have access to their own data. They administer the assessments, they collect the data, they use it to make instructional decisions. But at the state, we don't have access to that information, and we are limited in what we are actually allowed to see by state law. To solve for privacy and access concerns, we created a standardized data collection tool for participating school systems only that would allow us at the state to compare results without compromising student privacy. We taught school systems how to input consistent data into the tool at very specific time points, and then we analyzed the data. We developed analytic protocols to produce results at the cohort level, so all of our SSIP school systems, and also at the school system level, the school level, and each grade level. In our categorical approach, we measured the number and percentage of students with disabilities who increased or decreased by one category, increased or decreased by two or more categories, and the number and percent who stayed consistent over administrations. At each collection point, we added to the prior results so educators could see trends over the course of the school year. We then built in feedback loops with our existing data inquiry processes at multiple times throughout the year. We coached each school system on their results so they could accurately interpret the data and make instructional adjustments. We at the state used the results at the cohort level to make larger scale infrastructure adjustments as well.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Christy, Joe, and Louisiana. Appreciate that information on how you're using your local data. Let's move on and hear a little bit more from Melissa and Natasha in Guam about how Guam is using their local assessment data.
The access to the data for Guam, we use AIMSweb, and AIMSweb provides a summary and detailed reports for students, classrooms, and districts, which can be generated immediately once the testing is complete, with the results resulting in math and reading composite scores, helping to estimate the risk to students and classes for meeting end-of-the-year goals. When we look at the AIMSweb data access, school administrators, teachers, and instructional coaches here on Guam have access to the screening and progress monitoring data. AIMSweb allows and provides teachers with the information needed to differentiate instruction and determine who will benefit from the intensive intervention. The data analysis, teachers conduct the following analysis here on Guam. We determine, based on the results we have 3 benchmarks, but based on the results from fall, winter to spring, we determine if the problem is a grade level problem, a class-wide problem, or an individual problem. We also take a look and conduct a miscue analysis on the errors on oral reading fluency in order to identify the type of intervention needed to address the focus and skills for those students. We also take a look at graphs and charts. We allow the students to graph and chart their analysis of their data, their individual student data, so they take ownership of their work, and then we also take a look at the PDSA process using that to guide the teachers to plan, do, and study and act on the type of interventions that are needed. And then we collect the fidelity data in administration of the screening tools. So the administrators go into the classrooms, we identify whether the teachers are collecting the data with fidelity, and then we sit and then we talk about what are some of the things that we need to provide, whether it's to the teachers or how the grade levels can work together to identify those particular problems. And then when we look at collaboration and feedback loops, on the next slide, when we look at collaboration and feedback loops, we use professional learning communities to collaborate with other grade level teachers to review the data, share best practices, and make data-based decisions. Again, using the PDS cycle that we provide our teachers with ongoing professional development, we have them take a look at that cycle and then plan out their action plan for the skills needed to address. And then we also take a look again at the fidelity of the administration and using the data to determine ongoing professional development. So we take that information and that allows the teachers to be guided along with the instructional coaches and school administration. At the district level, they pull the information and they look at that with the district, and then they share that with the superintendent and the board members to see how the schools are performing across the district.
All right, great. Thanks, Melissa and Guam. So let's hear from Kansas.
All right. Thank you. Data is used within at the building level for a variety of reasons. For example, they look at the core instruction quality and teacher effectiveness quality. They can look at the students in need of intervention and may need more specialized instruction. Teams can also look to see which students may need to be tested further using another assessment, or if they need to dig deeper into what a student's instructional needs are, or if they need to use a different diagnostic measure for that. When a district adopts Kansas MTSS, every building and classroom will use database decision making, and that's what this data feeds into that process. Our state trainers and the district coaches that they support use the data in turn then to monitor the effectiveness of the buildings and effectiveness of the district implementation overall. And then at the state education agency level, we aggregate the data and use it for then reporting on indicator for 17. So our analysis looks at determining the percentage of students with disabilities who score at or above grade level benchmark across all the grade levels. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kansas. Appreciate that. So I know that we were going to sort of take questions at the end, but I'm looking at our time and we're doing pretty good for time. So Cesar, let me just check and see if we have anything in the chat box, or if there's any other states on the phone who want to jump in right now with any questions for our panelists around the selection of the local assessments that they're using, anything about how they're using the data that they're gathering, or anything about their particular context.
No questions on the box, on the chat box yet.
Okay.
So I guess we can open on the. Are you opening on the phone, or you want to wait?
Yeah. If anybody has, we'll take a few minutes and see if folks have any questions or comments at this point in time. Okay, not hearing any at this point in time. So let's move into our third area of discussion with our panelists. So we're curious about hearing, from your particular state's perspective, lessons learned and advice that you would give to other states in terms of working with local assessments and data as it relates to your SIMR. So Louisiana, can we start with you on that one?
Sure, thanks. So as I've talked throughout the course of this conversation, in Louisiana, in the short term, we ended up using a categorical analysis approach to be able to make comparable determinations or use comparable results across the school systems in our state. This was, I think, a real-world decision based off of what our existing context was in our state and the fact that we're a local control state with school systems using a variety of different types of benchmark and interim assessments based off of what their unique needs are. Looking back, we did some things, some of the things that we have on the slide, I think we tried to do them, but we didn't do them well. And there are other things on the slide that we should have done. So if there are any states on the phone that are in the process of adopting this style of approach, I'd suggest you do at least these 4 things. The first thing is to pilot the data analysis approach before you scale up to your SSIP cohort, like all of your SSIP schools. It's impossible to predict all of the challenges that will come up, and doing a small pilot at one LEA or even one school before you do it across your entire cohort allows you to find and address barriers to success in a low-stakes way. The second thing would be to inventory the local assessments to identify and address potential challenges in advance. If your LEAs can choose their own assessments, they will measure different things. Like some of our assessments were aligned to our state standards, some were not. Some were concept aligned or skill aligned, some were not. They'll do assessments at different intervals, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, 5 times a year, with different ways of reporting results. They may have a different number of categories. They may have insight statements. They may have more descriptive results. Understanding this landscape in advance is essential to crafting any sort of sound solution. The third thing is to identify and advertise successes as early proof points to increase buy-in with your LEAs. We knew in Louisiana that we were asking LEAs to take on an additional burden and to do it multiple times a year. This would not have worked without their buy-in, and they wouldn't have seen value without early returns that positively influence their instructional practices. The fourth thing is to account for extra training and preparation time for school systems to collect and enter data. Double or triple how much time you think it'll take for school systems to know what data to enter and how. It takes a long time. People have varying levels of data savviness. Some people are really good with Excel, some not so much. So the level of technical assistance and support you'll have to provide to school systems can vary wildly, and you really should factor that into any project planning in this kind of work. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Christy Jo. That's really good advice. Definitely. So how about you, Guam?
Well, one of the things that we've highlighted over the past 3 years that we continue to place great emphasis on would be our job-embedded and ongoing professional development and that need. Because like any new initiative that's implemented in any school district, I'm sure, the level of support and the systems must be in place, of course, for anything to be successful. And so here, our professional development, of course, topics and things are driven by the needs of teachers as well as based on the data that we collect as administrators when we do our observation or when we conduct our professional learning with our teachers. Many of us, the majority of us, meet weekly with our teachers to gauge the level of implementation and identify any other support. So from this type of feedback, we come back to the table and we collaborate on what future topics and what, based on the needs. So we really hear from the teachers and drilling down to the students and what's going on in the classroom. we stress, of course, that what's getting us through this is the strength of our collaboration. We've developed, of course, relationships with our teachers and our teachers with our students because of the ownership that's involved. When we started off this, we planned for all students. And with that, we had to ensure that from the teacher, from the administrators, down to the teachers and even to the school staff, that they know what we're doing and what it involves of them and the commitment from them. So there's a lot of ownership that takes place in our schools, and that's something that, one, is working for us with the use of our PDSAs and the constant collaboration and discussion even with our students. So our students are amazingly articulating where they're at. They're involved in the process, and that's a huge step for us in Guam as well. Another area, too, that we continuously take a look at is how we measure fidelity, right, to ensure that the outcome data is valid and reliable. We spent some time really dissecting that, taking a look at how our teachers are assessing, to how they're collecting that data, and then we come back to our planning team and, of course, include our instructional coaches in this, and then within that time frame, we discuss deeply what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, what needs to be changed. So as we mentioned earlier too, for example, the development of those guidelines, the teachers have shared their appreciation for something that's more formal with regards to how they're implementing, what they're implementing, and then they appreciate also the consistency from school to school. And just like Louisiana mentioned earlier too, we're working on scaling up, but we identify that we first need to ensure that as the 4 schools, that we have it all figured out before we kind of pull other schools into the picture too as well.
Great, thanks, Guam. So I'm hearing, some common things so far between Louisiana and Kansas relative, to sort of that data training piece at the local level. How do you ensure that you have valid and reliable data, and that sort of collaboration and ownership of what's actually happening? So thanks to you two. Kansas, how about you?
So when we first started this, we kept adding new districts each year, and that data was then reported in our APR. So we added new districts each year to the data pool, but those new districts were at different stages of implementation. So the last ones to join would end up masking the progress that was made by the districts that had been involved in receiving the intervention for multiple years. So for reporting purposes, we switched to reporting a stable cohort of districts for the APR purposes. Now, each year we still add new districts to the Kansas MTSS integrated process, but when we report for our APR, we maintain a stable cohort of districts from which that data comes. So we know that stable cohort showed progress last year, even though we didn't meet our target. We can see from the evaluation that the database decision making is helping the students with disabilities make progress and close the gap. They're improving in their reading accuracy, even if they didn't improve as much in fluency. And we know the importance of accuracy. So our coaches and state trainers are able to support them to monitor the interventions being delivered appropriately and to make sure that the assessments are used appropriately and that consistency and fidelity is increasing. So and they're able to do that because they do have long-standing relationships with the different teams in the schools, and that's really proven to be an asset for us. And the relationship of the MTSS trainers and the coaches within the buildings, that relationship is focused on improving student results for the classroom of all students. And that's an important focus, and because they share that mission then with with the teachers in the classroom. The state implementation team wants to make sure that the assessments are used appropriately, and they know it's important to use that data then for the purpose for which it's intended. We also have then used the State Systemic Improvement Plan overall process as a way to strengthen and ramp up how the Kansas multi-tiered system of support model was being implemented statewide. And so we purposely didn't start a new or different initiative because of the SSIP. We did that so that it wasn't just one more thing. So these districts that we're pulling data from are doing this because it's a district school improvement initiative that they were already engaged in, and we're pulling a slice of the data. And then just as the state implementation team has worked hard to build that culture of database decision making within their buildings and districts, and we've been able to really focus on having a utilization-focused evaluation process, and then that in turn has helped guide us within the state education agency to practice and use database decision making as part of our work processes. And that's been a well-received challenge at the state level that has helped inform our work. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Carrie. So hearing some of the same things that we heard from Louisiana and Guam, but also adding some additional pieces around, the notion of leveraging with your other initiatives that are happening and sort of how you're using your evaluation data to inform what's happening with your SSIP. So some similar things and some different things. So thanks to everyone for responding to that question around sort of what are those lessons learned and what advice would you give to other states. So we're just about at quarter to the hour, and so I wanted to take the opportunity to first of all check in with Cesar to see if we do have any questions or comments in the chat, or just open it up to folks who are on the phone to ask any questions to our three states, make any comments, have any discussion. We have a little bit of time for that. So let's open it up and see if folks have some things to add.
Okay, there are no questions on the chat box, so I guess we can open for everyone to
Okay, or you can add your questions or comments into the chat box if you would prefer to do that. So Guam, this is Maureen. I'm just kind of thinking through sort of how your system is set up, and I know that it's similar to like Hawaii and so forth. So you have one district that's part of the State Department of Ed, correct? As you guys think about that, do you think that provides any like things that work really well as a result of having one district with your SSIP, or does that provide any unique sort of circumstances?
Well, within our district, we have 41 schools under one district. So for the elementary level, we have 26 that we work with, but primarily just under the SSIP, we are only working with the 4 schools from the region. So our district is divided into 4 regions, and so one school from every region has been selected to participate in the SSIP. And then the 4 schools, like Natasha was talking about, our planning team, we meet together and we kind of discuss what the needs are, what our focuses are in terms of making sure that, we measure our SIMR, what the data looks like within the 4 schools, and like Natasha had mentioned, scaling up. But like Louisiana, we wanted to make sure that that data that we are gathering is evident in the progress that we are making at each of the school sites, which is why we developed the standard operating procedures and guidelines for implementing the Ames Web. Because, when we implemented it as a district, we realized that there was not a standard SOP. And based on the 4 schools working together from the different regions during our collaboration, not just with the 4 principals, but with the instructional coaches and the teachers, we decided, even with the district, we decided that there needed to be a standard operating procedure and guidelines so that when we start to scale up or when we move into Ames Web Plus, that everybody is speaking the same language, administering the tests with fidelity, and also analyzing the data correctly and to help make data-driven decisions. So that's kind of what has helped us being able to collaborate within the 4 regions.
Great. Thank you. Reactions to Guam or questions or comments?
Yes, to Guam, I read in one of your SSIPs that at some point your teachers added a request for a different type of local assessment. So where are you in that process, or what would you recommend about what you learned from that process?
So thank you for that question. And yes, as Melissa mentioned, we really take time to discuss and take a look at the needs of our teachers. Through that collaboration, what was shared was that Ames Web, with regards to reading comprehension, really just told us foundational skills, or gave us information on foundational skills our students needed. So we felt that there was a need to identify an assessment that would kind of give us more information that would help us gauge the level of the depth of knowledge in terms of reading comprehension with our students. So we've identified 2 assessments, in which we use. 2 schools use Fontes and Pinnell, and the other 2 schools use the DRA2 kit. And so far, this has been like the first year of implementation with full implementation school-wide with the Fontes and Pinnell, and the feedback that we're gathering from our teachers, of course, was the level of intensity of some of the assessment questions, of course, aligns with our curriculum, the CCS standards and so forth. So we're seeing deeper skills, acquisition of skills within our students as well.
So Cesar, we are also purchasing the assessment kit. So the 4 regions within our district has been divided. So 2 schools take the Fontes and Pinnell, and then the other 2 schools are using the DRA2 kit. And the beauty of, for example, and I'll speak of the DRA2 kit because that's what I use at 1M Guerrero, is the students have that additional assessment, and the students are actually choosing to read and be assessed on actual books. They're not just passages or excerpts from an assessment or data system. It's an actual book that the students get to choose. And if it's a little bit more difficult for them, then the teacher will then move on to the next book. So it's an actual book that the students are reading versus just a passage. And so when the teachers had said they wanted additional assessment, it's because the Ames Web data you're testing in whole group, and sometimes individual student, but it's through a data system versus the DRA2 kit, and I believe the Fontes and Pinnell allows the teachers to have that one-on-one and then allows the student to actually open up a book and read from those passages to determine their fluency and their comprehension.
Great, thanks.
Okay, great, thanks, you guys. Appreciate that. Cesar, how about other questions, comments, some things from the audience?
No, nothing on the chat box.
Okay, Jesse, can you move on to the next slide then?
I just want to say that Christy Jo had to leave, and she's saying that feel free to connect with her if we have any questions for her following the webinar.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Christy Jo. Appreciate that. So just to wrap us up, just wanted to provide a little bit of information on the services that NCEO can provide to states relative to supporting your SSIP and your SIMR as it relates to using local assessments and assessments overall. Of course, we'll facilitate state teams and stakeholder meetings around the 6 key strategies that are provided in our brief around using local assessment data. And if anybody needs access to that still, please feel free to contact me, and my contact is at the end of the slide deck. And we'll also support state teams in working with your schools or local districts to apply these 6 strategies. And on sort of a broader level, definitely helping states with troubleshooting challenges in the use of existing assessments and in your assessment system. We provide TA around that as well. Kathy, if you could move on to the next one. Certainly one of the things that we're able to do is connect you with other states that utilize common assessment measures that you might be using to share your experiences, strategies, and tips, just as we did today with our 3 state panelists. We're able to facilitate conversations definitely between your special education division and your assessment division about measuring progress towards your SIMR. So if you need an external facilitator to provide assistance with those conversations, we're able to help with that. And of course, assisting states and districts in developing participation guidelines and accessibility and accommodation policies for the use of local assessments. So those are just some of the broad areas that we can provide technical assistance to you on, but of course, we're always hoping that you'll reach out and contact us to talk through any issues that we might have, and we could talk about providing some targeted or intensive TA to you on those particular areas. I've included my contact information here, Maureen Haas, haas001@umn.edu. Please feel free to contact me directly, and I can connect with our team about strategies or ways that we might be able to support you and your state and the work that you're doing with your districts or schools. So we're at the end of our presentation, but I wanted to take some time to really thank you. Thanks to our panelists. We so appreciate you sharing the information of what's happening in your particular state. So Christy Jo, who had to drop off already from Louisiana, thank you to her. Carrie Haig from Kansas, thank you so much, Carrie. And Melissa Limo and Natasha Dela Cruz from Guam, we appreciate hearing from you from the building principal perspective and how Guam is working with you, and also, of course, for being up early today. We appreciate that. Certainly, if there are states who are on the line and want to connect more or learn more from our 3 state panelists, feel free to contact me and work to get you in contact with our panelists. So with that, I just want to do a final thank you to our fabulous team at NCEO that's been working around this really important topic of using local assessment data to gauge interim progress on your SIMR. And so that's Susan Hayes, Steve Ruffini, Cesar Dagord, Carla Howe, Tony Ruggiero, Kathy Strunk, and Cheryl Lazarus. Thanks to all of you guys for your work around this. So, and thank you, states, for joining us today. We know it's the end of your day, so we appreciate you being on the line with us. And I think we have wrapped it up for today. So thank you, everybody, and thanks to our panelists.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, have a good night.
Bye-bye.
And Guam, have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.